Joining us now from Xiamen in China is O.E. Sun. He is Najib Razak's former political secretary. In Kuala Lumpur, we have Charles Santiago, a member of the Malaysian Parliament for the opposition Democratic Action Party. Charles is also the chairman of the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights. Completing our panel is Mohamed Nawab Mohamed Osman, coordinator of the Malaysia program at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for your time. Well, this is a story that the whole world is following. O.E., how independently wealthy was Najib Razak before he became Prime Minister in 2009? That's a really important issue here.
Well, he's the scion of a political dynasty. And in developing countries such as Malaysia, of course, such a family would have accumulated a certain amount of wealth. But I think he did put out a statement about a year ago saying he was independently wealthy even before he became prime minister. But I think some of his brothers, they put out a joint counter statement saying that their father, who was the former prime minister, was a frugal person, and then the father did not leave a lot of sort of inheritance for the family members. So you have Najib saying, and you have the sayings by his brothers.
Yes, but independently wealthy enough, do you think, to be able to afford a diamond necklace worth $27 million?
Well, again, we are in developing countries. Sometimes you have businessmen especially, but also other politicians who would, of course, like to, to sort of contribute this sort of shall we say, showy materials for example, the dependence of senior politicians. And that appears to be the case here.
Charles, as far as you know, has Najib Razak ever produced any evidence that his money comes from somewhere other than 1MDB? 1MDB is this government fund in Malaysia that, of course, the whole story centers around this at the moment. Najib Razak being accused, he and his associates, of taking hundreds and millions, billions of dollars indeed out of that fund. And that's why I mentioned a diamond necklace worth $27 million. There are other allegations. We'll come to those in a moment. But has there ever been any evidence directly provided by Najib that his money comes from somewhere other than that fund?
I think at this time, there has been no evidence provided by him or corroborated by others, which gives us an impression that the money has come from his family or he's inherited the money from his family. It is quite clear that a whole chunk of his recent wealth could possibly come from 1MDB. For example, the acquisitions on jewelry, for example. The pink diamond, the famous pink diamond, is worth 115 million ringgit. This is humongous. There's no way somebody could afford that with his kind of salary as a prime minister and a former minister in the Malaysian government. And also the acquisition of Birkin bags, which runs into hundreds of thousands of ringgit. Again, not possible with his kind of salary or the wealth that he could have acquired just being a minister, or the income from being a minister or a prime minister in the last so many years. So clearly there are other sources of income which he has not accounted for. And I think this money that came through to his account, the purchase of the pink diamond clearly came from 1MDB. This is evidence you see from the Department of Justice report that was made available a year ago, which actually identifies money going into his account and also the purchase of diamond, other wealth, supporting the making of movies, purchase of art products, Van Gogh's art, for example, purchase of luxury hotels, homes, and so on and so forth. Clearly, the sovereign fund, which was meant to acquire wealth for the country, was used by Najib and his cronies in order to acquire wealth in a fraudulent fashion.
Yes, okay, now these are just allegations at the moment. Let's let the anti-corruption task force complete its findings. The investigation seems to be well underway. Mohamed, do you think that whoever took the money, 4.5 billion according to the US Justice Department, being taken out of one MDB, and as Charles said, including valuable art, a Picasso painting which was gifted to Leonardo DiCaprio, will Malaysia ever get any of that money back? Could it get all of that back?
I think at this stage it's very hard for us to say whether those money will probably be ever recovered back. I think it is probably going to be a long drawn process. This is just the beginning, and as some have already commented, it's just the beginning, it's just the tip of the iceberg, and that perhaps what will be discovered, I mean, this amount of 4.5 billion is just through the DOJ's investigation, but the suggestion from the current Prime Minister, Mahathir Mohamed, is that this is just the tip of the iceberg, and perhaps even more money could be discovered to be wrongfully used. Now, the question of whether they're going to get it back, I think, like as I've said, is a long drawn process. This money has been spread across many different countries, including Singapore, for example, but countries that are friendly to Malaysia and have vowed to essentially assist in the investigation process.
What does it say about the former Prime Minister, Mohamed, that he and his family are enjoying this lavish lifestyle while the cost of living continues to rise in Malaysia, while the economy suffers, and of course that affects the vast majority of the population. But he's living this lifestyle. There's a certain disconnect there that affects, actually, Charles, I'll come to you on this as well, but Mohamed, first of all, that does the population see the politicians as living a totally separate life to what other people are doing in their daily existence?
Now, I think when we look at the previous government, the Barisan Nasional, when we look at the previous government under the, which is led by the United Malay National Organization, it is not uncommon for us to see leaders, even leaders, just members of parliament from the then ruling party that has amassed large amounts of fortune. And this is really through a patronage system that was created, well, actually by Dr. Mahathir when he was Prime Minister previously, where there is a certain dependency on the government. It is a system aimed really to strengthen the position of the President of UMNO, and whoever is the President of UMNO historically has also been the Prime Minister of the country. But I think where Najib differs is the extent to which he has done this, because this has come at the expense of essentially investors' confidence in the country, and it has impacted the whole economy of the country. Under Dr. Mahathir, the Malaysian economy actually enjoyed very good economic development. And, you know, despite the lavish lifestyles of Mahathir himself, people like Daim Zainuddin, the former finance minister, I think people were a lot more willing to close an eye with regards to this. Precisely because the economy was doing well, they found their standard of living getting better. But this is not the case with Najib. In fact, the cost of living, I would argue, has been one of the key reasons as to why his government fell.
Charles, how does it affect you as a Malaysian politician when Mohamed says not only is Najib Razak to blame for leading an excessively lavish lifestyle, obviously I'm paraphrasing Mohamed, but Mahathir Mohamed. I mean, these are two of the biggest figures in Malaysian political history, and surely they represent Malaysian politics as it is today because they're the figureheads.
Sure. I mean, I think the point that Mr. Nawab raised is a good point. The whole system of patronage that we have in this country, not only involving Najib or even Mahathir, but also Muhammad Taib in Sarawak, who acquired millions and if not billions of ringgits of wealth through fraudulent means and so on. I think basically this is a system of patronage which has been encouraged in order to stay in power. And I think the message that came out in the elections 2 weeks ago clearly says that Malaysia wants a stop to this. Malaysians are quite fed up and quite tired of being taken for a ride. And what is clear was that the point that you had made, Mr. Chair, on the cost of living, the high cost of living, that was an issue that people could not come to terms with. At one side, you hear about the Prime Minister's wife purchasing Birkin bags worth thousands of US dollars, and jewelry worth millions, whereas the common Malaysian family, so the average Malaysian family, was not able to put food on the table, was not able to buy medicine for their families, for their family members, and Malaysia was facing this notion of stunted growth among children. So clearly it shows there was this lopsided development, and people could not stomach the increased cost of living with stagnant wages over the last 20 over years. So one of the backlash, if you want, to the system was people rejected Najib as well as his wife Rosma, because they were seen as the culprits to the problem that were faced by people. But I think the point raised by Mr. Nawab earlier, that we are dealing with a system of crony capitalism, a system of patronage, and this in some sense was the cause of the problem. But having said that, I just would like to raise an important issue about the source of wealth that was supposed to have come to the Prime Minister Najib Razak. It was supposed to be a donation from the Prince, lots of money apparently for 2.6 billion, and subsequently other forms of money was given by the Saudi royal family through the Prince to his family, to his personal account. Now, today, this morning, the anti-graft agency, MACC, pointed out that they had gone to visit the Prince in 2015. And the Prince was not able to provide any document whatsoever that this was actually a donation given to him, given from him to Prime Minister Najib. So therefore, it raises another question: was it really a donation, or was it a kind of an excuse given in order to placate the money coming to his personal account? And I think people in Malaysia have not seen such fraudulent exercise in front of them, where state funds meant for people are being abused and taken away, siphoned off in order to enrich the former Prime Minister's family, and together with his cronies.
Yeah, that issue of the money being given by the Saudis, which they said was a personal donation to Najib Razak, I won't go into the details of it now, but if anybody cares to look, it's quite clear that there are statements that have come from the Saudi Arabians that don't tally with their subsequent statements. So there's something definitely, I think we'd be safe to say, odd about those donations. Although Najib Razak says he did pay back 620 million out of the 680 odd million that he was given by the Saudis. OE, Charles just said that the high cost of living, other factors as well, but primarily the high cost of living, people had had enough, so they got rid of Najib Razak. But of course, they had to vote for somebody. And the alliance that they voted for, led by Mahathir Mohamed, is that a natural political alliance, or was it very much created with one sole purpose, to get Najib Razak out of power and for Barisan Nasional to lose this historic election?
Well, of course, if you look at the composition of now the ruling coalition, the Pakatan Harapan, you cannot help but feel that, of course, it is a sort of hobble coalition. But at that point in time, I think the people of Malaysia, the most voters in Malaysia, as have been pointed out by the two other commentators, they are fed up of Najib Razak's administration and of especially UMNO's more than 60 years of somewhat corrupt, well, in fact, very corrupt rule, and therefore they would like to have a new government in place. And at that time in time, Dr. Mahathir leading such a coalition consisted of, for example, Chinese-based parties, consisted of Anwar Ibrahim's multiracial party, Dr. Mahathir's Malay-based party, and even an Islamist, albeit moderate party. This coalition came to power, and now, of course, as you see in the composition of the cabinet, for example, you need to work very hard to make sure that each of these component parties is happy about their share of the, for example, cabinet positions. But I think so far the people of Malaysia, they are willing to give this new coalition sort of a stretch of, shall we say, honeymoon period. Number one, to investigate the 1MDB and related, as well as other corruption scandals. And number two, to rectify the economy, which admittedly is still in the doldrums in terms of being trapped in middle income and so on. But this sort of, I think, honeymoon period will end after, let's say, 100 days, as Pakatan Harapan has promised. Yeah.
Ihsan, do you think that Najib Razak is going to get a fair trial? There are some strange happenings going on, are there not? Anwar Ibrahim was imprisoned under Najib Razak's rule on charges of sodomy. A few days after Mahathir Mohamed becomes elected as Prime Minister, Anwar Ibrahim is pardoned. And then Mahathir says, in 2 years, I'll resign and Anwar Ibrahim will become Prime Minister. There seems to be some kind of strange conspiracy, almost, you could say. Does all of that suggest that Najib Razak is actually going to get a fair trial, or will they find him guilty because they don't like him?
Well, I think in the eyes of the ordinary Malaysians, these are not so strange happenings, because the charges and conviction against Mr. Anwar in most Malaysian voters' mind, as have manifested in the vote on the 9th of May, was that these are trump-up charges against Mr. Anwar, primarily by the Najib administration. Therefore, a speedy pardon, I think, is very much in line with the popular wish. On the other hand, the people, I think, also very much demand swift but open and transparent and fair investigations into 1MDB-related scandals on the one hand. And I think on the other hand, of course, the whole world is also watching that, that Mr. Najib would hopefully, if he is prosecuted, then he will get a fair trial and so on. You see, for example, your TRT, which is a Turkish station, would also be watching this particular trend of the development. So I think the Malaysian authorities will not be able to sort of ramrod through speeded or accelerated conviction of Mr. Najib. But thorough investigation, I think, is indeed on the way.
Okay, we're running out of time quickly, so be brief. Mohamed, if you don't mind, is there any reason to doubt the independence of Malaysia's courts and its legal system?
No, I think there's been a huge question mark as to how independent Malaysia's judiciary is. But I think we have to remember that a lot of the judges and the people who are in the judiciary system really came under a lot of political pressure to exercise their judgment in a particular way. And given the independence, I mean, if this government is serious about ensuring democracy and they step back and allow the judiciary to take its course, I think you might see a trial. And I think we have to remember something. There has been an empowerment of the people and an empowerment of the civil society. The civil society in Malaysia has claimed credit for the success of the opposition in this election. And they will be watching very closely. Already members of this current government, Nurul Izzah, for example, daughter of Anwar Ibrahim, has come out criticizing the police for coming to raid the home of private home of Najib Razak in the early mornings, and basically said that this is not right and there has to be a certain proper way of how things are done, which actually to me is a positive sign in showing that the leaders of this new government, they are serious about ensuring democracy, about ensuring freedom, and ensuring that an independent judiciary exists within the country.
Gentlemen, we are now out of time, but really very interesting to hear your thoughts about this truly fascinating story, which, as you say, even TRT World is following. It's global news. Thank you very much for joining us on The Newsmakers.